Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Higher Definition Radio. I would say something to Everett, but he already know what I'm gonna say. We would count down 5 minutes for 5 hours. But thank you, Everett, on Black
You're in the
History
black hole.
for making the countdown look like something. We want to thank you. Looking forward to this show because it's kind of a question that we kicked around for a month or so, and happy that we got Pastor C.T. Kirk to join us. Boy, y'all black folks in this African attire, y'all need to cut that out. That could have been the slave master's gear y'all got on and don't even know it. Yeah, see, we be doing too much, black folks. We gotta stop. We gotta stop. But I'm gonna go around and see how everybody's been. Jimmy, thank you, sir. We here. Tia, how's your week been, man?
Week has been great. I was able to attend the South Carolina Law Enforcement Victims Advocate kickoff on Friday and had an absolutely amazing time with some law enforcement victims advocates. Had to hang out with our Attorney General for a little while, gave a great speech. Absolutely amazing. Then got to attend the Girls on the Run Gala with Dr. Houston Friday evening. We absolutely had a ball for a great cause. Had an amazing time. So I've had a event-filled week.
Good. Mr. Abel, how are you, sir? Or eBay or Matumbo?
Joseph Assadai. We went to the University of South Carolina's drama department, put on a production of the Raisin in the Sun. And man, it's great, man. That's actually the first play I ever seen in my life. My mom took me to go see it at Winthrop when I was like 5 years old. And again, it's just great, and it's hard to find African American themed plays. So any opportunity that if it's within driving distance, we try to go see something.
And hey, Bo, hope Bo you're doing well. Good to see you, Jimmy Dixon. Good to see you, Diane Walls. Who else have said hello to us? Tia's here, so all the people that's joining us tonight, this will be a good show. Pastor C.T. Kirk, or I don't know if you went by your African name today in church service, but how are you, sir?
Doing great. Listen, if Jimmy gonna sign off to everything you say is true, I'm gonna get off right now. Something you saying tonight gonna be wrong, and Jimmy gonna sign off on it like it's right. It was just gonna boost up your head. But it's been a great week. Listen, I am so excited about tonight's show, as I have been doing some researching, and so I'm just excited tonight and just so thankful to be on with the Higher Definition crew again. It's always a pleasure. It's been a great week, and I'm excited.
Thank you, Pastor C.T. Kirk. Hello, Mr. Davis. Thank you, hey, Deidre, for joining us. This is going to be an interesting show because we're in the end of Black History Month, and we talk a lot about culture. A lot of churches had African attire today and had Black History. We've read Black History all month, and it's one of these topics when you start talking about culture with Black folks, like who's teaching it, especially over the last 10 years, the whole concept of whitewashing history. But Tia, let me start with you and ask you, whose responsibility is it to teach our kids our culture and our history? As soon as she get that mute button unstuck. Everett, I'm gonna go to you on next question. Whose job is it to teach our kids our culture and our history?
I'll say first and foremost it's our job, but at the same time, like I think everybody should learn about, like we should all try to learn about each other. I mean, Pastor Kirk was a history teacher. I'm sure he, gets a lot out of learning about Greek and Roman culture, and the Vikings, and all the people all over the planet. And I think the more that we learn about each other and understand that we do have a lot in common, and a lot of the racial tensions that we deal with today, some of it is relatively recent, and don't even go all the way back to ancient history. So the more we understand about each other, I think the better off we all will be.
Let me go to you, Tia, because I'm gonna save our history teacher and pastor for last. Tia, whose job is it to teach our kids our culture and history?
So I think you're asking a question that's a little twofold here. Schools do teach history. Like that is a curriculum in school, right? So they teach history. I think a part of education is teaching the history of our country. And in that history of our country, there's a history of certain people and certain things. So history is, taught in school, yes. But I also believe that in teaching history and teaching culture, it is up to us as parents, up to us as families and communities to teach our kids culture, to teach us history, because even as we grew up and we got history, we didn't get everything. We didn't get everything about Black history. And even, now we're learning certain things about what our kids are learning. And we're like, hey, that we're not talking about this, or we're not talking about that. So some things we are, as parents, should be filling in the gaps. We should be filling in the gaps. We should be correcting things. And then we should be backing things up and bringing things current for our kids. And I'll save some of my other thoughts about the history and the culture for later. I'm sure you got some pretty deep questions that you want to get into, but I think it's up to all of us to be teaching history and to be teaching culture. I think most times as people, we confuse the two.
Want to say good evening to Sharon Johnson for joining us, and all the people that's joining. We would love to hear your comments on whose responsibility it is, because it sounds like Everett and Tia got this thing wrong to start off with. Jimmy, you can go ahead and say Lamont right as we start. I mean, long as we teaching our kids the electric slide, the stanky leg, the newest handshake, I think we're good. Pastor Kurt, whose job?
Hold on before you go to Kurt. I just want to point this out. Jimmy Dixon, Lamont is wrong, and he's wrong right there, because those things he just mentioned, those are not culture, those are not history, those are trends.
Do the stanky leg.
I don't even know how to do the electric slide, so.
Well, you see right there, you ain't accepted. Pastor C.T. Kurt, whose job it is to teach us our culture and our history?
All right, so that's again, as Tia said, that's a twofold responsibility, because history is just learning facts about the past. History is learning who created the iron and why was it used. Culture is our language. Culture is our social acceptance. Culture is how we relate to each other. Culture is how or where we came from as a people. And since many African Americans cannot trace that history back to the Western African nations, we have a different form of culture. Now we have Southern culture. We have those that migrated to the North that have a culture. We have those that came from money that have a culture. We have those that didn't come from money that had a culture. We have those that from the hood has a culture. Those from the suburbs have a culture. So the cultural aspect in which we're raising our children is how we relate to where we came from. How we bring about why we say show do when people up north say what's up son. Cultural aspects is how did our family create this aspect of why we're always walking sickly, or we're researching why we always have diabetes, or we're researching our expressions. So our culture must come from where the Bible tells us it's come from when it says train up a child in the way that it should go. Let your children understand the cultural aspect and why they came. Now, what we have done is we have put all the notice on the schools to teach us what we don't want to learn at home. And so because of that, we're expecting a teacher, not from our culture, to instruct our children how to understand our history, when we are the responsibility of our history. But this is not just our problem, because we're finding out now Hispanic students don't understand culture or their history either, because they have been taught how to be American. And American is just simply going into the ways in which America sees fit for you to go. And so within our culture, we got to understand that should be something that we're training our children at home, that when we correct their English, when we correct their mannerisms, when we correct how they deal, we're showing them the basics of the culture, but we got to research that ourselves.
No, that's an excellent point. And I want to speak on the history part of it, because I know you're a history teacher, and it disturbs me sometimes when I listen to African Americans talk about history and where we came from and how we got here. Like, we got folks talking about we came from the northern part of Africa, far eastern part, northern part. Like, we want to be something that we're not. How do we tackle the true history? Like you mentioned, the Western slave trade from the West. How do we tackle that this cultural, this historical vacuum where we can't even agree where we came from?
So many times when we research, and I see my children do it in the classroom, they hit a question in Google, and the first thing comes up, they read it. They don't know how to go in and get the scholarly sources so that they can piece together the puzzle. And so when you look at the slave trade, we first of all know that race didn't even become an issue until later in the 15th, 16th century, where it was identified as you are a Black person, you are a white person. Everything else was tribal, everything else was territory. And so we know that the Portuguese went to Africa because the natives to the land could not live up to the malaria or the diseases brought on by the Europeans. So they wanted a race of people who was strong enough to be adaptable. And we even seen this in COVID, that the last place that got hit hard with COVID was in Africa, because of the immune system of the Africans was so strong, it was fighting off of the COVID bacteria. And so when they went to get the Africans to come back and do the work that the natives could not do, and then we go into chattel slavery, we go into how the women were made to have children in other words, to build up an economical system. So slavery was more about economics than it was about the racial parts that we like to allude to, because when you look into the history, Lamont, as you said it, Philemon talked about slavery. China had slaves, Rome had slaves, and their slaves were white people. Chinese had Asian slaves. Mansa Musa had Black slaves. And so slavery was all around, but when it got to America, it was more about the economical benefits more so than the racial benefits. And so that's the first thing we got to do with our children. We got to tell them why we are in America, why our people came to America was built around the economic standpoint. Then from there, we got to go on, because really when Carter G. Woodson came up with the African American, or what he called the Negro Week, it was to spotlight the advancement and the achievements of African Americans in America. He didn't go all the way back to Africa. He didn't go, no, he said right here in America, say, okay, this is who was invented the stoplight. This is who invented this. This is who invented that. And so he was giving us a basic understanding. It was until 1986 that it even became a month to celebrate. And that was because Carter G. Woodson said, hey, Abraham Lincoln's birthday, George Washington's birthday, Frederick Douglass' birthday is in the month of February. Well, now with more research, we find out, okay, Abraham Lincoln, this great man that we call the emancipator, was caught up in a system in which he had to pick a side, that it wasn't his initial goal to say, hey, I want to free all the slaves, but we were able to worship him for all these years because we never picked up the book, looked at the scholarly resources for ourselves. But we want a teacher who wasn't raised around our children. We want a teacher who was brought in from Winthrop to go and break down the constructs of our African-American history. When we at home have been saying Rosa Parks was the first African woman on the bus and avoided Claudette Covington, who was a 15 to 16-year-old girl because she was pregnant, because she did not have the look, because she was not in the NAACP, but she was blackwashed, I call it now. I wrote a book on whitewash. Now I got to write one on blackwash. That how so many African-Americans say, well, that ain't the right look that we're going for. We want an American look and not the truth. And so when we start looking at the social constructs and what we look in, then we'll be able to understand that, hey, get a book, sit down with your child and start reading over some of the great advancements of our people.
Man, you said a lot, and I was thinking about different misnomers in history and how things get turned, and then you start getting black folks saying this stuff like, nah, we talking crazy. Like, we ain't even making logical sense. And Everett, I'll go to you. And one of these things, historically facts, that there were more slaves taken to Cuba than to America. I know we think we got the lock on how many slaves were transported from Africa, and we think they all came to America. No, they went to Cuba. More went to Cuba. And it was all about the economics. Everett, why do you think we keep stumbling? Me and you have some pretty direct things that we talked about where black folks be we doing way too much without any kind of background or historical facts. And I'll throw this one out there. I would love to sit down with President Obama, because he says the greatest president or the president he admires is Abraham Lincoln. And President Obama's a scholarly guy. Like, he's well read. So he has to know that if you read Abraham Lincoln's writings, he talked about black folks as porch monkeys and all kinds of derogatory time. So hence to what Pastor Kurt was saying, pick a side, and this is a side he picked. Everett, why do you think we have history so messed up?
Yeah, for me, I'm there were definitely some Republicans who were a lot more radical than Abraham Lincoln. But what we got to understand is that if one of those other radical Republicans had been the president, like he wouldn't have been able to do what Lincoln did. I think I look at Lincoln more as just a politician who, for whatever reason, he moved the country in a better direction. To be honest with you, one of the reasons why we lifted him up so much, we didn't really have nobody. One a whole lot of other heroes for us, especially when you talk about American government. So, it's I don't hate Lincoln. You know what I mean? Like, there are definitely some worse people, but to your point, I think a lot of times we try to, I guess for lack of a better term, we try to whitewash the history and to try to clean up people and make them perfect in order for us to appreciate them. I think it's better for us to learn about the complexities of these individuals and then just appreciate them at these people as they were. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to make Lincoln Saint Abraham in order to appreciate like what he did. Like, and again, not just to say that he put his life on the line, but he actually gave, like, that's, he got murdered over slavery, if in my understanding. So it's a lot more complicated than that. I mean, like I said, I'm not saying he loved black people or he had black people's best interest in mind. He was a man of his time, and he was behind some, but he was much farther ahead than most.
No, interesting point. And I still want to go back to some of our direct historical mistakes we keep perpetuating as a race. Tia, why do you think we keep missing some of these historical points, or it's not being taught efficiently?
Well, I think it goes back to a lot of what Kurt was saying earlier, is that we're asking people to come in and teach a history that sometimes they can't relay that very well. They don't know how to relay it. And so they tell or they teach these things the way that it was taught to them. They can't elaborate into some areas and some things about, if we're talking African-American history, they can't elaborate in that and teach that the same way or tell it the same way that if it was coming from someone that was been versed in African-American studies, African-American history, or even if it came from somebody at home. Not taking away from anybody saying that you can't teach it better, because I've had African-American studies at a university and I had it from a white professor that knew more than some black people that I've talked to. So that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is we are very critical of teachers that are teaching history that are doing their jobs the way that they're being told to teach it, that they're being told this is how it has to be and this is what you have to say. So our expectations are way up here for what we want our kids to learn, and we're not being active in doing anything at home. We're holding the school and putting the school completely responsible for what our kids are learning and how they're taking that information in, is what I'm saying. And we don't get involved. We don't want to get involved. And we're expecting them to do a lot of the jobs that we don't want to do at home. We want to push it off on them and say, well, shouldn't you be learning that at school? Shouldn't you be teaching him that? Isn't that why he comes here, from 8 to 3 every day? Well, he comes here to learn some things, but that doesn't take away your job at home. That doesn't dismiss the things that you should be doing at home. You still should be teaching your kids history. You still should be having conversations with them about what they're learning. You can't put that all on one person or one group of people. Where is your responsibility as a parent, as a community, as a family in any of this learning? And see, what we're doing is we're taking everything about history and we're calling it culture. Nope. It's what Kurt was saying earlier. History is about study of past and facts. And culture is all about your personal beliefs, your traditions, your way of life, and how things are. We tend to mix the two things. We say that, our history, we wear our hair braided, and we wear afros and our natural hair. Yes, that is a part of our African American history. And it has also become our cultural history. It's a part of our culture to do those things, but we also mix those things with trends. We say that trends are our culture. Wearing our pants hanging off of our behind. I've heard this so many times on social media. I've heard people come out so many times when they're having interviews and saying they're trying to take away our culture and what we're doing. That's not culture. Wearing your pants on your behind is a trend. It is something that someone did and everybody picked up on it and ran with it. It's not culture. It's a trend.
And Tia, when they go to the background behind that, that's a very scary scenario, because what they would do is take the biggest, strongest black man out, and to give him to a white slave master that was gay, they would break him in. It's called breaking the buck. And so when he would wear his pants off his hips, that would mean that he was already broken into, so that they knew who to give to the white master. And when I expressed that to my children, that basically, because we thought it just came from jail with a homosexual that was in jail, but when you really look at breaking the buck, they had the African-American males get broken into, the strongest ones, the ones big like Everett and Lamont, to say, okay, I'm saying this because if you take the biggest and the strongest of them, you're going to scare everybody else into submission. And so this is why you had 200 slaves on a plantation that never attacked a family of 4 white masters, because once you scared them into submission, and we have to understand this today because we're scared into submission. Look at what we think as being successful. Successful to us is the money, the house, the car, the look. We're scared that if we don't have those things, then we're not successful, because we've been scared into submission. And so everything that we do now has been a culturally whitewashing of our mind to say, this is what being cool looks like. I remember when I was growing up, in order to be African-American, you had to be hard. You couldn't speak and be like, hey, how you doing, buddy? Or they was considered you to be white. And so we were whitewashing our mind to think that our culture was hardcore, negative, gangster rap, gotta fight, gotta do these different things, until somebody came along and said, wait a minute, that's what you've been trained and been taught. But go a little bit deeper into history, and you will see that what you're trying to mimic was something put on the slaves in order to culturally whitewash them and mess them up for generations.
Right. It was something that was put on to break people, to break them, to break your mindset, to break your spirituality, to break you as a person. So that's the history behind it. But we've taken something from history that we didn't even know. So we're talking something that we didn't even know was history, and we've taken it and made it a trend, a fad. And don't even know what it means, don't even know the insight to it, didn't even know that if some of our ancestors saw this, they would fully be like, what the heck is going on? Like, do you know what you're doing, boys? Do you even understand the history behind what you're doing or what you're saying? And Ed just Pastor Ed just put up something that I always talk about, that Willie Lynch syndrome. Supposed to be a 400 years before that breaks. And this never gets old. Willie Lynch syndrome never gets old because we do it all the time. It's this systematic approach of breaking people, of turning us against each other. And we call that culture. No, sir. That's actually history. That's not a cultural thing. It is history. And we've adopted that as a trend, that it's okay that I trash my brother, that I trash my sister, that I do things to break my sister's willpower, that I do things to break my brother. Those are not cultural things. Those are trends and things that we have taken on. Instead of building one another up, you take the Willie Lynch syndrome where we turn each other against each other. Willie Lynch syndrome, they put Black slaves that look my complexion in the house. They had the darker slaves out there working the fields, and they turned them against each other. You think you better than me because you're working in the big house. Things like that. They take those histories and they turn that against each other. They turn us against each other and use that history to continue to divide us as a people.
And let me say this as we go ahead, Everett.
No, I was just going to ask a question because I'm curious. Like, at what point does the fad become part of the culture? Because I'm assuming there's one point where bebop was a fad, jazz was a fad, hip hop was a fad, but now these things are kind of ingrained. We accepted that they are part of our culture. So where's the line between the fad and culture?
We might be a little too sensitive on this cultural topic too, and that's just Lamont speaking. For the people that know me, and this is a side topic, that I think Eminem is the greatest rapper of all time, and it's all from Black folks who tell me he can't be because he's white. That sounds ridiculous to me. That sounds almost as racist if we're talking about country music, and I said, somebody Black. Like, that sounds so racist. Like, Beyonce is in this whole storm right now because people can't accept her music as country music. Like, we have to be very, very careful on how we appropriate our own culture, that it doesn't sound racist. And then and Tia brought this up about skin tone. Like, I didn't used to be sensitive about pointing out this person is dark, this person is light. Like, I would say it all the time within our own group. But I am a lot more sensitive about that because people have lived some tough lives as Black folks being compared, you too light or you too dark. Like, how did we get to that point, Pastor Kirk?
Again, systematically, we were almost trained that way, and it kept going beyond slavery, where light was separated from darkness. If you look at Obama was accepted as a candidate for the United States presidency because he was a mixture of race. Imagine if Obama had the skin complexion of Al Sharpton. He would have looked more of a threat to the social norms of America. And so we got to understand that the colorism has always been a part, even today's time, where we used to categorize people as you look better if you're light. Darker girls cannot get certain roles in movies because of their complexion. And so that was something that we continued to push, even as an African-American race, where we would look at people and say, you sure is Black. You never heard anybody told a light-skinned person, you sure is light. But they would always say, oh, you Black is this, you Black. And that was almost a identity crisis within our own people, that we were looking at the importance of colors and then getting mad when the Caucasians just said you Black. Regardless if you're light, regardless if you're mixed, you're going to be Black to me. But we created that and allowed that to continue to go forth. It's the same way we create and allow the N-word to keep going forth. You can't say the F word that is derogatory toward homosexuals anymore, or you would be blackballed, you'd be blacklisted. But you can say the N word in any music, in any movie, and it's not being blackballed, because we allow these things to continue to go forth. And some of the battles that we should be fighting, we're not fighting those battles because we have learned through systematic racism how to turn on each other. And that is the whole thing, that's the crab in the bucket mentality is that if we can turn on each other, we'll never be effective. But I'll tell you one race that have got it. For the longest, they told us as African Americans, if you want to be successful in America, you must go to college. You must get a bachelor's degree. You must get a master's degree. They put us in all that debt and then turned around, and Caucasians and Latinos and Mexicans have now found, hey, let's go get the trade jobs. So that when the African Americans with the college degrees need somebody to fix plumbing, to fix electrician work, to pave their parking lot, to cut down their tree, they're going to come right back to us. And so here it is now. We were pushing our kids to get in debt in college without saying, go get the trade that your granddaddy had. Because remember, we allow brick masonry to go away. We allow asphalt paving to go away. We allow construction to go away. And then who came back and got it? The same ones that pushed us that college will make you better and make you stand out. So we got a lot of learning, and we got to be able to define what's really in the culture of being a successful African American. It can't waver. It can't deviate, because the Mexicans that came over from Mexico only had one thing in mind. We're going to be successful so we can bring our grandmama over, our mother over, our children over. That's going to bring us together as culture. They still do knocking piñatas down. They still have quinceañeras because they hold on to the traditions. They hold on to their value. And so we got to say, wait a minute, okay, what does success look like? Can you be a successful electrician that owns your own business? Can you be a successful doctor? Can you be a successful brick masonry? And stop saying, okay, the only way to success is you got to drive this kind of car, live in this kind of place, have this amount of money in the bank. And when we get that, color won't matter to us anymore, because we'll be able to say, you know what, we all as a people are going to come up together.
Everett, I'm gonna go to you on this colorism. We know every black person got Indian in their family. Like, you can't meet black folks without got a little Indian in them. You know, you got a little bit of straight hair. Yeah, you know, grandma was Indian. Everett, how do we get past this, man? Like, we always try to be something else other than just black.
I know I was watching one of those Henry Louis Gates specials, and he got into that whole, you know, black people got Indian, and he's saying statistically that's just not true. And that a lot of that straight hair came from rape. It's a lot easier to be able to say that, hey, my family got Indian in their blood and grandmama got raped. So, you know, like how do we get past this colorism? I mean, Pastor Kirk hit it right on the head. But only thing I could add to it is that, you know, when we were growing up, one of the worst insults you could give to a black person, especially a black child, is to call them African or anything having to do with Africa. Mm-hmm. And so this is one of those things that was ingrained to us, that we not only hate ourselves, but we hate where we come from. And to the point where if you hey, let's go. That's one of the things that Malcolm X was talking about in one of the speeches. He talked about you go up to a black man and say something about going to Africa, like, hey man, I ain't going to Africa. You know, I ain't lost nothing in Africa. You know, and we still kind of have that mentality that every group of people, no matter where they come from, have some connection to their roots, their homeland, their motherland. But like, we not only don't have that connection in a lot of ways, and it ain't everybody, I think it is getting better, but a lot of us have a hatred and just we don't look at our roots in a high regard like some people do. So
we've been taught to stay away from that. Like, start talking about some black stuff at your job, or even with black folks. Black folks will get a little squirmish on you. You start talking too deep black. Tia, what are your thoughts? How do we get past this colorism that we can't escape?
So I don't know if you guys remember, but a while back we did a show on colorism. And we talked about some of these things. And even though we try to get away from colorism, I don't think we'll ever get away from it, because it exists all the time and it exists with everyone. We are notorious for this with fraternities and sororities, where this began, the brown paper bag test. So, I mean, even then, we're still looking at who's light, who's dark, and we go through this cycle. People look at your skin tone and think, well, she must have some white in her. I'm a light-skinned girl with green eyes. I must have some white in me. My dad's the same color as Pastor Kirk, and my mom's light-skinned. So you get told different things. You must think you white, or you think you better than someone, or she thinks she's cuter, or she's prettier. You get these whole things. So everybody experiences light, dark. Everybody goes through this whole thing about colorism. But the thing about it is, we promote this kind of stuff with each other. We promote this. We promote this, and we laugh about it when somebody say, "Oh man, she's so dark," or "He's so dark." She look white. We engage this. We promote this stuff. We think it's funny. We think it's okay. And then when our kids start to experience this stuff as they grow up, we upset by it. We don't want our kids to be exposed to the colorism. We don't want them to have to go through the same things that we went through, but we don't have the guts either to sit down and have a real conversation with them about what colorism is and where colorism came from. So that goes back to the history. We don't want to educate them about these things because we're afraid. We're afraid of what it means if they know the truth. So also, just a lot of things with colorism, I think, comes from a lot of fear. We fear that someone is better because of the way they look. I say sometimes when I'm around certain people, Black people can be some of the racist people you ever want to meet of each other and the most critical people of other people, but we'll swear up and down the man keeping us down, and we can't get ahead all the time, and it's always another race trying to keep us down. But we are some of the most critical people of each other and other people all the time. Instead of building up character, we choose to tear each other down and choose to be so critical of each other. And
I think some of that is survival, though, right? That we're trying to survive and get ahead. And the people that we see that's in the race with us look like us. So you got to keep them down. Correct me if I'm wrong. And please, no one in a sorority, just correct me if I'm wrong. Am I right? Or where is this coming from in my mind that the Delta sorority was started because they were dark skinned and they couldn't become AKs? Is that just a rumor, myth, or is that historical fact behind that? And if please, no one email me because I know folks are curious about.
That's what my answer is. I don't want to know.
Man, I think you're onto something. And colorism, is I think a lot of times because we're African American, as they call us. We were colored, we were Black. We've been all through all the cycles. We only think that things affect America, but there are a culture of people in Jamaica that purposely bleach their skin.
Yeah.
Because they believe that lighter skinned people get better rights being light. And so they literally take bleach and a Brillo pad and they stick out like a sore thumb because you can't bleach. And I work, and I'm blessed to be working where I am now because I'm working with international teachers that are from Ghana, that are from Jamaica, and they hear the stories they say, and you alluded to something earlier about me and Eric and the Dashiki, but just sitting down with one of my brothers from Ghana, he said the first mistake that you guys make in America is that you think those telecasts where the poor kids that need food is all of Africa. So you are already thinking all of Africa is poor. He said, but Africa is the richest nation in natural resources. And we've taken back many of our resources from the Portuguese, from the British, and from these other countries. So Ghana is probably one of the most beautiful places in the world, but you guys see us on the 2 a.m. channel with the white guy giving a piece of bread to the kid and they need water, and you think all of that is Africa. He said the second thing that you must understand in Africa is we would never allow our children to be as disrespectful as your children are in America. He said in Ghana, we feel like Black people in America got a hold on their children because all the economical processes that you guys make, until we come over here and teach and realize y'all allow y'all children to talk back. Y'all get mad at the teacher. He said, in Ghana, we still smack you with a ruler. And so whenever we think about culture and when we think about history, we think about places, we never think about what really got our people over was discipline. That we were disciplined even when we didn't have anything to eat but collard greens and a piece of fat back. That we were disciplined people when we walked 6 miles to go to school. And now we've removed discipline and put in the NBA, the NFL, money, rap, and all these things, and taken away discipline. And this is why we fail so many times on so many of our cultural aspects, because we're trying to give our children everything we didn't have. But the one thing that we had that made us stronger was discipline. That if you showed out in Boy Hill, by the time you got back to Midvale, it had already been a phone call made. that if you showed out on Green Street, they already knew it by the time you got home. And so before we can even start teaching history, we need to teach it from the aspect of these kids were so disciplined in the 60s that they wore church clothes to school, jumped out of a window, marched downtown, had dogs sicked on them, water hoses put on them, but that discipline was nonviolence agreement. So if we're going to impact our children at 5 years old, 4 years old, they need to be understanding these disciplines so that by 16, it's not hard for them to reach, because they already understand that in order to make our people great, we have always been a people of discipline.
And I just want to add something on the colorism topic, something that we didn't really hit on. I think we don't really understand how much of an effect that colorism has on people, people's mental health. It's a really big thing. And I'll use an example. I have a blended family. So I'll use an example. My husband and I don't have kids together. However, my first cousin, Jasmine, was mixed. My uncle black and her mom was white. Jasmine struggled as a young girl at ages 6, 7. We could see and recognize in her. She struggled with who she was. What should I be? Jasmine had honey blonde, kinky curly hair. What we consider now, natural hair, if you wet it and it curls up, it's kinky curly, it's hanging, it's nice and beautiful. That's the kind of hair Jasmine had. And it was okay as long as Jasmine was living here with my grandma in the house with us, and we're black. Kinky curly hair is okay because she was my complexion. That was perfectly fine. Jasmine had hazel eyes, and this was perfectly fine. However, when Jasmine moved back home to Alabama with her mother, who is white, and she's predominantly around white people, hanging out with her white friends, Jasmine wanted to be white. And she struggled with, I don't know if I can be black. I don't know if I can be white. And some people say, well, why do you have to choose? Well, when you get older and you have to go for a job, colorism does play a part in this. You can't be my complexion and go in and put on an application. Your preference was white. You look like me, you got to check the box that you black. It doesn't have a box that says, are you biracial? It doesn't have a box that says, you mix with something. You got to choose black or white. And she couldn't go and she couldn't choose that she was black. If she said she was white, people looking at her funny. Jasmine went off to college, but Jasmine had straightened her hair, dyed her hair dark brown. Jasmine looked like a white young lady. And she struggled with this so much and saying that she was white and pretending that she was solely white, that in school, when people found out that she wasn't all white and she was, she was mixed and she lived in a neighborhood that wasn't approved of by her uppity white friends, Jasmine committed suicide. She couldn't deal with the fact that she was half black. She chose something because she was forced to choose something. Like, if I'm going to hang out with a certain group of people, I got to look a certain way. I got to be a certain way. But in Jasmine's mind, she also believed that if I say that I'm white, I can live in the nice neighborhood like all the friends that I hang out with. I can wear the nice clothes like all of my friends wear that I hang out with. I can have the nice cars. I can have the labels and all the stuff that they wear. If I say that I'm white and if I look white, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to have all these things. If I say that I'm black, I'm going to live like my mom lives, or I'm going to live, in Richburg in a country town like my dad.
We're going to switch gears a little bit. I want to get in and talk about Pastor C.T. Kurt's book. Everett, put his book cover up, if you don't mind, for a second. All right. You can take it down. And then Pastor Kurt, I'll ask at some point that you put in the chat, the thread, how people can get it. And I think that's your second book, right?
Yes, sir. That was the one that got me in a lot of trouble.
Can you tell us what your thoughts were? Because a couple of things come to mind for me, even looking at that cover and then knowing you. One, you're a pastor. Two, you're a history teacher. So tell us the thought process behind it, and then how did that go over, writing a book like that?
Well, first of all, if you go to Barnes and Noble, you'll see a nasty comment that somebody, I think I know who it is, put about the book and didn't even read the book. I think it was more of a personal shot against me than reading the book. But that book right there, I was writing that doing my master's program, and we were talking about I got a master's in history, and so I said, you know what, that'd be a good book, but I was very afraid, and I had an editor who edited the book that was a Caucasian, and some of the things that were in the book were put out of the book. And so, I mean, that book even talks about how Jesus became blind, dark, what's colors have brown hair and blue-eyed Jesus. It talks about how the coloration of some of the stories that we see John Wayne and Clint Eastwood playing, how they were taken from African American stories, how country music is only a hymn song with acoustic guitar. And so that book really got me in trouble, because a lot of times people don't want to talk about real history because it has been whitewashed to be acceptable in America. Like, if we really talk about America and how it genocide, how America colonized different countries, then we really get into some stuff that we don't want to talk about. And our standards make sure that we don't want to get this. So Lamont, I'm sitting around the desk. I'm excited the book came out, but I got to keep the book on the low because I'm scared. And I remember the superintendent coming to school, and he walks up to me at the desk and he shows me the book, and I'm scared. I'm like, I'm fired, man. This guy done read the book. And he's like, can you sign this book for me? I was like, you want me to sign the book? He's like, man, I got a different perspective of John Wayne and Westerns since I've read this book. He was like, I didn't even know the contributions of the Mexicans when it comes to the spurs, the cowboy hats. I thought that was a white culture in itself, but then I didn't even realize the Mexicans own Texas and New Mexico and Arizona. And so when Caucasians went out west and seen these things, they were blown away, or that cowboys was a derogatory term for black ranchers. And so when he started to read, he was like, oh my God, well, how did I not know this? And I was like, when I began to read and some of the stuff was researched, and you got to be able to really dig deep, because a lot of times we just accept what our teachers say. We accept what we learn on YouTube or on TikTok. But when you begin to research, you realize that there are certain norms that people do not want to deal with in our history. And until we tackle those hard places and those hard points, for instance, the Bible says that denominations are not good. To separate yourself amongst the lines of Methodist, Baptist, Pentecostal means that you're creating a division in a whole body. And it's a body of believers. Paul said that we are many members of one body. He didn't say we were members of denominations, but we understand what Protestant people started saying, okay, this doctrine is more important than this, and split off. And so that book really got me in trouble, because I was challenging the thought process of the West. And the West is one of, when you look at Westerns, how many of y'all look at Westerns when you were little? You looked at the John Waynes, and everybody wanted to be the cowboy, because we were taught that the Indians were savages and they would cut off your head and all this and all that. And so really hitting that subject was really scary.
No, that's deep. You mentioned John Wayne a few times, and I'll ask anyone to go out there. And my father loves John Wayne, watches cowboy and Indian movies. John Wayne was not a friendly thinker to black folks. If you go and read some of his stuff, and it was a petition not that long ago because he has an airport named after him outside of it's in Orange County, California, right outside of LA, and people wanted to remove that name because of just go and read. And that's why we can't be focused so much on the moment without understanding the history of people that we look up to. I'm not saying we need to change if we think they're heroes. To Everett's point about Abraham Lincoln, there's never been a true documentary about Martin Luther King because his family fought it. And a lot of it has to do with Martin Luther King being a human. And he smoked, and he drank, and he liked women. Like, black folks can't accept that. Like, sometimes our heroes are not exactly what they portray to be. Everett, what are your thoughts?
I think that a part of that goes to there are people who make criticisms of black heroes that they don't make of any other heroes. You know what I mean? So that's one of the things I really want to be careful with. Like, if we're gonna shine a flashlight, we need to shine it everywhere, not just at us.
Good point.
And so we look at this as look at people as who they are. You know what I'm saying? In totality. Pastor Kirk made some good points, man. I remember like it might have been 20 years ago. I was at Manifest Disc or Manifest Records in Charlotte. That's back when we were still buying records and tapes and CDs. And I went to get a Earl Scruggs CD. I was getting into the bluegrass. Cause man, he's just incredible for what he can do with that banjo. And this white guy seen me, a black guy, in the bluegrass section, and bro, we talked for an hour about the history of bluegrass and how it came from black people, and old time music, and and all that birth country music. So, and when we talk about the whitewashing of our history and our culture, some of that is due to us, neglecting our own history and culture. When the Carolina Chocolate Drops came out as a black bluegrass band, people thought that was this incredible, like this weird thing, some gimmick. But no, that's the history. Like that's where we come from, and like just so many things. If you go to a blues club, you probably gonna see more white people than black people. There's a good chance you're gonna see a white blues singer. We went to BB King's club in Nashville a few years ago. White guy playing the blues. Yeah, nothing against it, but what I'm saying is like where are we in our culture? If you go to jazz, like again, it's not considered something that's really part of our culture. Like if you listen to jazz, people might say you acting white. And man, me and my wife was trying to learn shag dancing and didn't understand, didn't know, like, this is something that was created by us. But now, if you want to learn how to shag dance, you're gonna have to go to somebody white, because we don't know how to do it no more, even though we created it. I always joke, man, we're about 20 years away from white people being the only ones doing the electric slide, because they doing that too. So we have, again, like you travel a lot, you've been to Europe, you understand how they maintain their culture and their cultural identity back thousands of years. We don't hold on to nothing past 50 Cent and Jay-Z. Like anything 20 or 30 years old is too old, and we sit it down, they pick it up, they keep it, and then we end up with people saying that Eminem is the greatest rapper in history. So
and I'm gonna go to Tia, but you brought up a point about Europeans and their history. They guard their history very tightly. Even from the homes they live in, you will see people living in the 5th generation of the house. It's just been passed from person to person. Man, we'll lose grandma's house over $1,500 in taxes. And that ain't the man or whoever these other people we keep putting it at. That's us not being able to come together and say we're gonna pay grandma's house off so we can keep the taxes, so that so we have this house generations to come. So it's a whole different culture. And Pastor Kirk also brought up, when you start talking about New Mexico, Texas, like there are plenty of Hispanic people and Mexicans still there. And I know we get wrapped up because we're in the South sometimes, and we think that white people dominate everywhere. No, go to California, go to New Mexico, go to Texas. You're going to run into Hispanic folks. A lot of them that are doing business, that cross daily from Juarez or Laredo into the United States. Like when you get listen to these politicians, they talking about shutting off the border. You can't shut off no border. It's economics to that. And that people want cheap labor. I'm sorry, Tia, what are your thoughts when we start talking about, like Pastor Kirk talked about whitewashing history and every tied into it? What are your thoughts on that?
As I said earlier, having kids in school, you hear a lot about what they get taught, especially when they talk about history. Middle schooler, high schooler, elementary school kids, you hear a lot about what's taught. And I was just having this conversation with my son because he has history this semester at school. And one of the things I can remember when he was in elementary school, the whitewashing part, when I first realized what was happening, is when he was told that it wasn't slavery. It was, you know, black people they did indentured servitude. They was indentured servants. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, we learned today about indentured servants. And they had the kids do a skit in class where the black kids were slaves and the white kids was the slave masters. I was furious. I was lost my mind. And they said, well, this is indentured. You're being an indentured servant, not a slave. And, you know, so, you know, we're paying you for your labor. We're paying you for your work and things like that. And so I had to sit down then in elementary school and explain, no, baby, indentured servants and slavery, these are different things. These are totally different things. Some people got trapped being indentured servants into being slaves. They never got paid and things like that. And I had to explain these things. And that's when I realized that what we're telling kids is not what really happened. We're telling kids what we think we should be telling them to cover up the true history of the country. Like Kurt was saying, there's so many things that went on in history that our kids are growing up today thinking are the truth when they are far from the truth. There is no way you're going to tell me and tell my kids and me not correct you and saying that our founding fathers never wanted there to be slaves and their intention was for there to be indentured servants. Absolutely not. People that signed the Declaration of Independence and wrote the Constitution, let me tell you something. How many of them people did not have slaves would be the question. How many of those people did not have slaves, did not participate in slave labor, and didn't do anything, didn't have anything whatsoever, didn't agree with it, or didn't do anything with slavery? So when we're talking about whitewashing, those are the things that I'm talking about. We're pretending like those things didn't happen, and the people that signed those documents didn't intend for this to still be the state of the country. They also kept things from Black people and kept us uneducated in hopes that we would never understand and we would never know. And now the same thing is happening all over again. We have a generation of children that are coming along and they're not being told the truth about history in general and how this country was formed. We have people out here saying that Black people is the laziest race and we're a lazy group of people, but this country was built on the backs of Black people. Some of the richest families in this country got their money off the backs of slaves, and their empires were built off slaves. Slave trading, slave labor. And we don't want to tell those stories or put that in the history books because it's taboo. We can't tell the truth about what really happened in history and who we really are. If we told the truth, those Black people should have all of that money. They should have those riches. What about all the land that Black people should have had in Hilton Head? And the story now is all the Geechees and all the people in Hilton Head that live there, they have no property and they have no land and they're all working hard now.
And again, T, I think that's where the importance of deciphering history comes into play. Because so many times during African American Black History Month, we're told just facts about people that did things. What good is me knowing about Madam C.J. Walker if I don't understand the theme or the theories behind her life? And so in my classroom, we have a creed that we say every day that starts off with history is not about learning dates, place, or even names, but we will use history to teach us how to change the world for better. And when we understand about the systematic format of slavery and how it has an impact in our lives, we got to look back at Lamont. Union Baptist has a very rich history in this where the question proposed itself, what would African Americans free from slavery do if they had their own? So a shipload of African American people went to Liberia to found the only African country in Africa, the continent of Africa, by free slaves. And what did they do when they got there? They became slave masters to the natives in Liberia. So that mindset was so set up, and that mindset is even here right now. You take the average Black kid who has money, take him to the projects, and he will think he is better than every other kid. He no longer sees race. He sees economical advantages. And so that's why we got to teach the overall history concepts of it, that yes, we're free from slavery, but we got to shake the slavery mindset that said that you're better because you got a 2-parent household. You're better because your dad has a good job. you're better because you stay in Indian land and not in the city of Lancaster or Rock Hill. Until we shape that mindset, what we're going to create is more and more, because now you have a group of African-American people that are identifying with the oppressors and saying, because I've got these shortcuts, I've got political backing, I got now look, and I hate to say this on Aaron Lamont, if I get in trouble, you can mute me right now. Tim Scott was against Trump. Tim Scott could not stand Trump. There was nothing that aligned Tim Scott with Trump with the values of Tim Scott. But now we're hearing Tim Scott is advocating for Trump because Trump can say, hey, you could be a political ally, you could be a vice president. And so now you got a separation within the race. Again, because now we're identifying with the very people that we couldn't align ourselves with until we were able to get a shortcut. And now we've got, and now a shortcut for me does not mean a shortcut for Everett. It does not mean a shortcut for Lamont. This is why we're Football City, USA, with no football players that own any communities. No, we're begging the government, give us affordable housing, but we had enough football players to buy every single community in the 90s, in the early 2000s, before Tepler promised that he was going to bring this big facility and raise the market. And so, as Lamont said, we quick to sell grandmama's house, but we weren't quick to buy a neighborhood with our money as much as we were to parade our nice cars. We would have club outings and parties, but we didn't have economical workshops back then to say, hey, and now we're so far out of that to when people offer these things to us, we don't even know to go get it.
Let me say this in a transparent moment. I am all for Black history, and I'm gonna say something, Everett, know where I'm going with it. I'm all for Black history, but I can't stand slave reenactments and plantations. Like, I can't stand to see Black folks doing that. It just does something to me. Like, we have plantations near here that are active or and if you're watching, listening, if you think I'm wrong, I'm fine with that. Please comment. Are you okay with seeing in 2024 Miss Mammy, some old Black lady, reenact, making, maple syrup or something? It just does something to me. Pastor Kirk, you're a history teacher, man. I want to see Black folks, and I want us to know our history and know where we came from. But it just seems, it does something to me to see that.
Well, I think a lot of what you're saying now is a culture of children that are so removed away from the pride in their own people that people are going to different extremes to kind of get their attention. And so you will see, hey, let's play slavery, or let's put on one door, colors enter in this way, whites enter in this way, to try to get children to see. Because I remember when I was little, Miss Jane Ruth came on, every Roots came on. Grandpa would have us watch all of those slavery movies. Martin Luther King movies would come on as a sense of this is where you come from. Well, now our children are so TikTok crazy, they're so social media crazy, that even the history teachers are like, okay, they're marking this off as boring, they're not going to understand, they don't care about it, so I'm going to try to push the package just to get their attention. And that's why I think that home life is so important, because when our children are excited about it in their homes, then they come to school, and it's just a way to be able to understand.
Everett, am I wrong for not wanting to see another movie, 12 Years a Slave, or I know I'm not the only. I've read articles of Black folks like, nah, we doing too much. We know it was hard. Am I? Because I feel a very deep resentment about seeing any kind of reenactments like this.
Well, it makes me uncomfortable, especially to watching slave reenactments. I don't know if I've ever seen a Holocaust reenactment, or or the Trail of Tears being reenacted. But at the same time, what does that say about me, that I'm embarrassed to see, slavery or slavery reenactment? The slave had nothing to be embarrassed of. It's the person that did it is the shame. And that's one of the things, like, people have a way of projecting their guilt on you. And I even though I feel what you feel, I'm not happy about the way that the fact that I feel that way. You know what I mean? And I don't just accept it. Because people have to know what happened. And if they don't see it, And what like I did say that they're not Holocaust reenactments, but there's a Holocaust movie at least once a year. Oscar nominated, they say, and rightfully so, we never gonna let you forget it. And I think that we should have the same thought process when it comes to not just slavery, but the Jim Crow, racism, and we never gonna let you forget it. It's gonna be we're gonna teach our kids about it, and we're gonna try to teach you about it. Because if we let people forget it, then it's destined to happen again.
Now you bring up a good point, and I have to self-check myself on these kind of feelings too. Even as you were saying that, I went to Dachau last summer, 2 summers ago, to the concentration camp. For the people who don't know, that's one of the largest concentration camps in Germany. And it sits in the middle of a town. Like, people think these concentration camps were out way somewhere in the woods. No, it's in the middle of town. Everybody knew what was going on and what was happening. But it is a somber event. Like, they're not going to let you forget. There is the horrifics of it. They still got the gas chamber set up, everything. But I don't feel the same way when I watch 12 Years a Slave or go to Brattonville. Go ahead, Everett.
Hey, no, you ever been to the Holocaust Memorial in Miami? They have a huge Jewish population down there, and the one they have like statues of silhouettes like laying on the ground. And when you go through, you get to that part, and you get to a part where you have to actually step over the bodies or walk around about, and it is really like, it's a very smack you in the face experience. And I'm glad they did that. And I really challenge myself to be able to accept things like that from us, to allow people to see what happened, because we get into a point where when they start teaching that slavery really wasn't that bad, or it really wasn't slavery, it was indentured servitude, or try to whitewash it or sugarcoat it, folks gonna be getting the idea maybe it was a pretty good idea.
And Everett, we're in a social conscious state of your mind. So anything that we're finding out new, we're going to put it in the movie. So we seen a area of roots that was one area, but 12 Years a Slave was like, okay, now we know who Mr. Upshaw is. Let's put him in the movie. Now that we know who Bass Reeves is, let's put it in the movie. Sure. Now that we know who Barnyard Rushing is, let's put him in a movie so that people can understand that, hey, there are a lot of heroes. There are a lot of stories that were not told. That now that we have Tyler Perry's and Oprah's, let's put these stories out there now so that we can begin to get these social conscious talks out there. And so I think that, it's hard to see because it's like a constant reminder of a part of history. But to those people that never are going to watch Roots, that have watched 12 Years a Slave, it was an eye opener. The people that didn't grow up on Miss Jane Pittman, but see a story of Claudette Covington, and Dr. C.P. Roddy right here in Rock Hill. It's going to be a reminder that there are local heroes and things around us right now that we don't see. And so even now with, I think Tia posed the question, Egyptians, now that we know Cleopatra was not Liz Taylor, wait for the new movie to come out with the real actors that look like her. Now that we know that Madam C.J. Walker really took the idea, watch the movie that comes out, or Barnyard Rushing was the man behind the Washington March, but he was homosexual and they wanted to hide him in the background. We're going to see these movies come out because the social mindset, people are waking up to, hey, these stories are not being told on this level, and let's get some power behind it to put this out there now. I think I'm owed about $10 million because now I'm seeing more Black Westerns than I ever seen before. And I know somebody done read my book and done made it. So I want my money because now Bass Reeves has got a series.
Tim, I'm going to ask you the same question. And
don't forget Django, though. You forgot Django.
Oh, boy, goodness.
I ain't talking about fiction. I'm talking about fact.
Let me say this. In Dachau, the gas chambers are still up. And I'm telling you, I would swear to anything that you can still smell human bodies in there being burned. That's how deep it is in Dachau. They're not going to let you forget. They're never going to let you forget. The Jewish community is never going to let you forget. Tia, what are your thoughts? Are you comfortable with seeing slave reenactments and all this stuff? Because I can own it, that I think I'm a little uncomfortable with it.
Well, I'm not going to necessarily say I'm uncomfortable with it. I just don't like watching them. I'm not uncomfortable. I just don't like watching it. I watch sometimes, I get angry, I get upset. I'm just like, nah, I don't want to watch it. But when if I do, I have a lot of questions when I watch it. It brings up a lot of questions, and I start going and researching stuff and looking stuff up. Like, did this really happen? Is this true about this person? What does this person actually do? Like, I go and I dig into things after I look at stuff. I just don't like it. I'm not uncomfortable. It doesn't make me uncomfortable. I just don't like to see it. But I do have a problem with the fact that people want to make movies and they want to make money off of the stories, but they don't want the stories talked to their children. They don't want the stories talked about in school. They don't want it to be part of the history, but they do want the money and the profits off of the movies that they make from that history. So that's what I have a problem with. That's what I'm uncomfortable with. I'm uncomfortable with the fact that you are those same people, some of those people that are behind the scenes on some of these movies and collecting those bigger checks are some of those same people that are advocating against these things being taught to the generations that are coming to tell, they don't want this stuff told. They're advocating against these stories being told and this history being taught to some of these kids. So that's the part that I have a problem with. You want to be, you want to have a profit center off of this stuff, but you don't want it to be told. And they don't want you to know that they support this, struggle for you not to talk about this stuff in school, because they can make money off you not teaching it in school by having a movie. You'll go watch the movie. You'll take your kids to see the movie because we're not teaching it at school. And I did bring up a point about Egyptians, but I brought up a point about Egyptians because I talked about this during the colorism show. And every time this comes up about race and things that we whitewash in this country, if anyone paid attention, I took a screenshot, printed it out, and kept it. On the census, in color and in race, it had Egyptian as Caucasian. Caucasian, and in parentheses, it had specific places. And like Europe, Irish, it had Egyptian. And for African American or Black, it had all these places in Africa, and then it had, Bahamian, it had Haitian, stuff like that in there. And then it had all these African countries, right? And then Egyptian is up there, but where is Egypt? And I know this has a lot to do with history and the biblical part of history, but how do you separate that?
Well, and I know we're getting close to time.
Yes.
It had, and Pastor Curtis, the history teacher, but on this
I get what you're about to say, because you and I have talked about this before, but you can't break that off from where it is. You cannot break it off from where it is. You can't claim what you think is the best part of a country and dismiss the rest of it.
Well, it was done as, so a lot of the mathematical advancements in the world were Egyptian. And when the discoverers, however you look at the discoverers or the conquerors, came to Egypt, you couldn't, because this whole narrative of savages and all that had been out through, what had to happen is you had to separate Egypt out to make it like it's not a part of Africa. And so there's historical lessons from the British, and you might see this when you go, whenever you travel abroad at some point, but there's books that talk about it, and you go to museums that talk about how the British made it a point to make sure people did not reference the advancements of the pyramids and all the technology stuff as Africa. They wanted to create Egypt as its own separate place. And it's happened. Like, we think of Egypt, we don't even think of Africa. Like, we don't even, that one and one don't even make two. Ever I see the look on your face.
No, there's something else, man. I was thinking about the fact that Alexander the Great conquered Egypt. He considered himself to be a pharaoh. Cleopatra.
African pharaoh.
No. Of course,
You get
but
what I'm saying?
just saying that. But once you conquer people, you pretty much decide what's going to go on after that,
Right.
And that's kind of what it went with. So again, and then after the Greeks, the Romans, then the Arabs. So at some point, people just stopped talking about us or even remembering that we were there. And then there's still, black people in Egypt. You know what I'm saying? So it's
yes, but you don't want your history to reflect that. You want it to be some other foreign place in the world.
Yeah.
So as we get ready to wrap up, this has been a great show. It went by fast, and I didn't think with 4 people to go by this fast. It's amazing. We could talk about culture and race and history. And Pastor Kurt, you've been a wealth of knowledge. And even we were just talking about advancements like mathematics. It's the Arab world is crazy. Like the zero didn't exist. Like we always think that math is something 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That existed, but not the number 0. Algebra is Hebraic math. Like stuff like that, we don't even talk about because we, in this country, the way America was constructed, want to make it look like someone very, very, very light created everything, and we just here. But Pastor Kurt, any final thoughts? Anything?
I think if you're going to start history in your household, take a certain topic that you want to research with your kids. If you're going to do black inventors, if you're going to do black politicians, if you're going to do black artists, and just, make that your dedication during that year, that's what you're going to focus around, because there is a wealth of history out there. And one thing about it is you want to know as much about the advancements of people that looked like you, as well as growing into diversity, because an appreciation for history reflects a lot of self-pride, self-worth. And that is one of the subjects that the school system does not take seriously anymore. They don't take history as much as they take ELA or math, and you'll see history get pushed on the back burner. You'll see it get pushed on an AB day, or let's just give it only 25 minutes. But when you understand history, when you understand, we call it now social studies. How do we socially impact other people? And so we see now the social skills of our kids are still underdeveloped. You see black kids sit at a table with black kids. You see white kids sit at a table with white kids. Hispanics sit at the table with Hispanics. But our working world does not reflect that. And so how are we going to grow in our social skills is what we got to be able to teach our children as well, because the thing about it is that I tell anybody now, the kid that can speak Spanish, if he get a little bit of English with him, he's already more advanced than the kid that can only speak one language, because the business world is changing, where you're going to have to be able to embrace. What are they learning in China? They don't just learn how to speak Chinese. They learn how to speak English, because if you got more than one language underneath you, then you're going to be stronger. And so these things that we got to be able to teach our kids when it comes to history. I'm going to say this and I'm going to leave it alone. When you think about Egypt and you think about the social constructs and the breakdown of it, the reason why it's never been called black or white nation is because of all of the diverse tribes that were in Egypt. You had the Nubian tribe, you had the separation of the upper and lower, and nobody wanted to be called one race. They wanted to be respected as the Nubians, who were the darker. You seen the Nubians with the silk hair. You seen the upper division and the lower division. And Pharaoh Midas came together and united all of Egypt. And so now you have a diverse melting pot. And so nobody's going to claim black, white, or anything. We're just Egyptians.
Okay.
Tia, any final thoughts?
No, I think tonight was a great show. Like you said, Pastor Kurt is a wealth of knowledge about this. Appreciate him being on tonight, educating us on a lot about history and how things are. I just think we as parents, like I said earlier, as a community, as families, have to be willing to take the time to put into our children. It's like Pastor Kurt said, take something, some different topics, some different subjects, some different things, and focus on those things with your kids. If they come home and they have questions about things, those are the things you have to take those moments and you have to educate them on those moments. You have to take that time and say, okay, well, let's sit down and talk about this. And then you get into the research yourself with the kids. And it becomes more of a family exercise versus this is like an assignment for the child. It becomes a family exercise, a family learning experience, and then you guys talk about it, and then it becomes like every time you get in the car, hey mom, guess what I found out? Did you know this? Did you know that? It becomes an educational moment for you too, because then they are in awe of what they found out. They are in awe of all the things that they're learning, and they're more willing to come to you when they find these things and talk about this stuff with you and have these conversations. It's like, well, they talked about this at school, but they didn't mention this, and that. And then you go and you find out things and you're like, okay, well, this is what I found out. Let's talk about this. What do you think about this? How do you feel about this? How does it make you feel? Where do you think this puts us today and things like this? If you don't start having those conversations with your kids, one, you're going to be lost into what they're actually teaching your kids in public schools. But two, your kids are going to be lost out here in the world when they get out here and things are going on and things are happening. And they're unaware. They don't know what is happening in their surroundings. They only know the small amount of things that they have been taught. I told my kids a lot. We talked about culture early, Mont. You and I have traveled a lot in our career. We've been exposed to many cultures: Chinese culture, Indian cultures, Taiwanese cultures. We've been exposed to lots of different cultures, European cultures. And because of that, we can adapt. But we've also learned a lot about people, about cultures, about what we'll accept, what we won't accept, what's accepting of other people and things like that. So you have to be raising a child that's diverse in many things these days. You have to diversify your children, because if you don't, you can't expect that society will.
No, great points. And while I'm thinking about it, Pastor Kurt, if you don't know Pastor Ed, who you keep seeing comment, I would love to hook y'all up together. Both of you are great gentlemen and like-minded in so many ways. It will be a great connection point. I'll make sure I make that happen. So, Pastor Ed, thank you for commenting. Mr. Abel, I thought about you this morning. You brought up Good Times on your Sunday morning inspiration. For the people who haven't saw it, please go back and look at it. He did a great job on his Sunday morning inspiration, but he brought up Good Times, and which made me think about the episode with Black Jesus hanging on the wall. What are your final thoughts, sir?
Well, first, I need to say I need to figure out a way of sneaking into Pastor Kurt's history class. I don't know if I could make myself into an elementary school kid again, but man, you've been dropping some gems on us, man. I really appreciate it. When you think about race and just back up and take a look at it, and we realize that most of the people, a lot of the people that we consider white today weren't considered white 50 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Like Jews weren't white, Greeks weren't white, Italians weren't white. And I appreciate learning the history, especially about us. I appreciate us trying to empower one another, each other, and encouraging each other. But at the end of the day, I don't see race as a unifying subject or a unifying factor for us as a people. I think when you look at we talked about North Africa, and you looked at parts of Southern Europe, some of them people could pass for black, dark, light-skinned black people or dark-skinned white people. A lot of this stuff, man, is just man-made divisions. Like when we look at Rwanda, when the Europeans went there and they just invented races just out of thin air, and those people still hate each other to today. And so a message I just want to leave with you, just us as followers of Christ, let's try to seek unity in Christ. Now, and I'm not just talking about the black church trying to unify and get together, or the white church trying to unify and get together, but those who sincerely believe that Christ is your Lord and Savior, let's try to unify. Again, I'm still black. I'm still gonna be black. You can't change it. You can't do nothing about it. But let us try to figure out ways for us to come together and show this world something that they hadn't seen since Pentecost. Like we need to come together, because we living in a world where folks thinking the opposite, and we need to have some folks who really want to come together and just show this world something that they've never seen.
Hey, Everett, can you put up Pastor Kurt's book again?
All right.
Pastor Kurt, can you tell people the title of both of your books and then how to get them?
Okay, I got the book How the West Was Whitewashed and the book Why Me Boys Are Molested Too. And they are available on Barnes and Noble, Amazon, all major book outlets. How the West Was Whitewashed. I think somebody got mad at it and probably sold selling copies on thrift bookstore. So you probably can get it on thrift bookstore as well. Yeah, Amazon is the first one you can probably go to.
Thank you, Pastor Kurt, for everything you do. We want to thank everyone for watching. This is one of those topics that even sometimes with Black folks can get a little squeamish when you talk about race and the things that we need to self-reflect on and might need to improve some stuff. And in self-reflection, we have to come together, and I agree with Everett. We have to come together, and race can't be the unifier in that. Believers, but yeah, we're all still Black. That ain't gonna change, but we need to come together as believers, and a lot of our worries about some of this simple stuff will go away. So I really appreciate everyone coming together on the show. It's a smaller panel than we normally have, but right on time. Pastor Kurt absorbed a lot of the air from any other guest because he's very knowledgeable about history. And as a pastor, man, I can only imagine some of the troubles you might find yourself into teaching history and as a pastor. So thank you, Pastor Kurt. Thank you, Tia. Thank you, Everett, for this show topic. It was good. I really enjoyed it. And I see Pastor Ed put maybe one of our best ones. And I would agree because we're talking about stuff that really, really matters. So have a blessed and safe week. Thank you for joining us. And if you have not, please go and check out Everett's Sunday Morning Inspiration. He did an amazing job this morning. He ain't going to be in front of you long. You ain't got to worry about that. But he did an amazing job. No, see, Everett, that wasn't no backhand.
I was just going to say, you talk more than I did.
That's what I do, Mr. Abel. But
we good.
Thank you, and have a blessed and safe week.
God bless you.